Hello everyone and welcome back to Feral Dolls. Before even the Barbie movie came out, I knew that I was definitely going to make one of Margot Robbie inspired Barbie looks in a doll form. And I'm pretty sure we're all extremely excited by all the amazing looks that we saw Margot Robbie wearing during the Barbie movie press tours. While I was in love with almost all the looks and I really appreciated the respect and the homage that they gave to the iconic doll, the Moschino skirt suit from the brand Spring Summer 2015 collection was undoubtedly my first choice for this custom. But before I get started though, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it of course, and comment. I love reading all your comments. With that all being said, let's get started. So I bought this Barbie Margot Robbie doll wearing her perfect day outfit. Let me quickly unbox this doll so that we can take a look at her outside of the box. So this is how she looks outside of the box. I mean, overall she looks cute, it's just I don't really like her bangs. They didn't really do side bangs the way they did in the movie, and her overall hair quality isn't the best one either, to be honest. But obviously I'm not a doll review channel, so I don't have much to say, so let's just begin undressing her, removing her accessories and preparing her for customization. As always, I used my hair dryer to disconnect her head from her body, and then I cut out all her synthetic hair. Then I used tweezers to remove her hair plaques. Then I used 100% pure acetone to remove her factory paint. But before I could paint her scalp and reroute her new hair, I actually needed to dye her hair, trying my best to match it with Margot Robbie's hair color. So I bought this very bougie Italian hair dye called 360. The number is 9, so I paid approximately $10 for this together with the oxy. Obviously, we do have cheaper hair dyes in here starting from like $1 or $2, but I don't know, this was like the perfect match, so I didn't mind splurging on it. So I used my scale and I mixed 30 grams of dye with 35 grams of oxy, and then I mixed them together. And then I painted her alpaca hair. And the alpaca hair that I bought, it was actually unprocessed and all like tangled and dirty, so before even hair dyeing, obviously I took my time to sort it and process it. Because processed alpaca hair isn't cheap, it can cost a lot sometimes, so this was the most suitable way to do this for me. Also, see Margot Robbie's hair in these reference photos, it looks two-tone. Like, I think there are multiple tones of blonde in it, so I thought that maybe I should combine the hair that I've just dyed with the undyed alpaca hair, so that I can have this effect. So I painted her head sculpt with a matching color, and then while I was rerouting her hair, I rerouted one section with dyed alpaca hair, and then the other one using the undyed alpaca hair on top of it, so that I could have the two-toned hairstyle. And as always, I used my rerouting tool, which is a combination of an X-Acto knife body and a needle that I broke the tip with using pliers. And this is how it looked at the end. As you can tell, the hair looks so much more like the actual human hair, instead of that frizzy synthetic hair. And all I needed to do now is to add some Fabri-Tac glue to her head so that the hairs won't unplug. And after the glue fully dried, I protected her hair and then I began the repainting. These are some of the reference photos of Margot Robbie that I used. I was a bit nervous at first actually, but then as I kept painting, the overall process went surprisingly smoothly. It's just because the scale is too small, my eyes hurt really badly. Sometimes I felt like Mr. Krabs with like tangled twisted eyes, but I don't know, shout out to all the Barbie scale doll repainters, cause this was way too difficult than painting on a Monster High doll scale. And when it comes to my impressions of the Barbie movie, well, I personally really loved it. I loved Margot Robbie as Barbie. I think she was just the perfect person to play Barbie. I mean, I think we all know who is the real life Barbie on YouTube, but Margot is also great, of course. And Ryan and the rest of the cast were also amazing. I went to see it the same day it came out in theaters, and all the seats were busy, the audience was so enthusiastic, like the atmosphere was great. Everyone was wearing pink and they all came with their friends. And I went there with my everyday outfit all alone, ready to get emotional while watching it. I mean, it definitely had a great message, and as someone who loved Barbies and grew up with Barbie cartoons from 2000s and wasn't allowed to have Barbie dolls and was forbidden to play with any kind of dolls and has a lot of, let's just say, not very happy memories associated with dolls growing up, the movie was very personal for me. Guess that's why it made me feel the way it did multiple times. But I don't want to go into detail about it, let's just say that I loved the movie, and if you liked it as well, good for you. If you didn't, good for you. Like, I don't understand why so many people are so pressed and angry about it. Like, can you let people enjoy whatever movie they like to watch without projecting your own insecurities into other people? And without making a 2-hour-long video destroying the movie with your opinions that no one really asked and cares about while being a man in your 40s and burning Barbie dolls. Like, are you okay? As I said, if you liked it, good for you. If you didn't like it, good for you. Just don't make other people feel inferior or less of a person for enjoying a movie about a doll. Especially when you are not the target audience for it. But anyways, that's all that I wanted to say. Let's just go back to repainting. So I drew the placement of her eyes and I painted the pupils blue and I called it a day, and I went to sleep. And when I woke up the next morning, I actually noticed that I painted her eyes a bit too far from one another, which I knew that if I continued with this as a base layer, there is no way it will look like Margot Robbie as much as I would want it to be. So to make sure that they are indeed far from one another, I took a picture of her head, then I uploaded it on Photoshop Liquify tool, and then I decreased the distance between the eyes, and when I saw that I indeed painted them far from one another, I made the really tough decision to erase the eyes that I have been painting for 2 days with little to no breaks and repainted them once again. I mean, stuff like this happens, that's okay, you don't really need to feel bad about it because the amount of time that you spend painting, you already learned a lot, so you just need to implement all that new skill and knowledge into your next portrait and just keep going until you reach the desired result at the end. Because I mean, after all, it's a learning process, you can't just try it and expect it to be perfect at once. So I drew the new placement of her eyes and I was very happy with them, so I began doing the final layers of blushing. I also painted her teeth. I really wanted to do a layer of acrylic paint for her teeth so that they will look brighter, but I don't know, I was a bit scared to mess things up, so I just did them with pencils only. And then I gave her some pink blush. And I also drew some tiny wrinkles under her eyes and near her mouth so that it will look more realistic. And while I'm repainting, let's talk about pencils. So the pencils that I use and I will 100% recommend, and I'm not sponsored by them or anything, by the way. So the pencils are the Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer watercolor pencils. And then the other brand that I use is their Vending Tense watercolor pencils. And then the new brand that I have been using that I absolutely love is Carandash Supercolor 2 Soft watercolor pencils. I use all these brands while repainting, and I definitely think that these three are the best pencils for repainting. And trust me, I used a lot of other pencils and I've been watching tons of repainting videos, so these are the best brands in my opinion and in my experience. And this is how it looked at the end. I also added the catch lights of her eyes. And once I did the final layer of Mr. Super Clear, I removed her hair protection. Then I sectioned her hair and began doing the curls. First I brushed the section, and then I used a wet toothbrush, and then I ironed her wet hair a few times to make it straight. And then I used some straws as curlers/rollers, and I also used bobby pins to keep them in place. And then I repeated the same process for the rest of the sections. Obviously you can just use boiling water to do this, but since I don't want to damage my repaint, I very carefully blow dried her hair while trying my best to avoid the heat reaching to her face. I left these curlers to sit overnight, and in the morning I removed them. And this is how they ended up looking. Obviously I still need to style them to look like this hairstyle. I used some of my brushes and also a toothbrush soaked in some water. And then in the end I also used some hairspray for fixation. And after I was done with her hair, I removed the kitchen rub of her face, and this is how she ended up looking. I really hope that you like her hairstyle. It definitely took me some effort to do so. Now it was time to make her outfit. I began by making her collarless jacket, but before I could start cutting all the pattern pieces and stitching the jacket, I needed to take her body measurements and make patterns for that. So I took the measurements of her shoulders from shoulder top to shoulder top. Then I took the measurement of her chest, the measurement of her neck, the length of her sleeve, and the sleeve width. These are all the measurements that I needed. I also divided her shoulder measurements in half, then her chest measurements by 4, neck measurements by 4 as well, and then the sleeve width in half. Then I drew the patterns using these measurements. So here is the chest measurement, the shoulder measurement, the neck measurement, and the sleeve width measurement. And this is the final pattern. I also drew the shoulder edge curve to attach it to the front piece. And these are the same measurements for the front piece. And I also drew the sleeve pattern. I will link a more detailed video for this, I just really didn't have much time to explain this very detailed, so I'm really sorry for that. I also wanted to show the trial jackets that I stitched with slimmer sleeve measurements, and it just looked too tight, so I used these current measurements for this second trial piece, and it looked as I wanted, so I began tracing the pattern pieces on the actual fabric. And for the crop top and miniskirt, I used the old method by wrapping her body in a kitchen wrap and taping her body with paper tape. And I actually forgot to buy some paper tape while I was in the city, and where I'm living we don't really have stores to buy a simple thing such as a paper tape. I mean, we don't even have a near pharmacy to buy medicine, so paper tape is way beyond the essentials. So I used regular matte class paper instead. Then after that I cut out according to the silhouette of her crop top and miniskirt. And then I cut out the patterns of her body. So these are the patterns. As you can tell, I cut out some space on her skirt and crop top so that the clothing pieces can have some space for her back and chest. After that I traced these pattern pieces on thicker paper so that it will be more comfortable tracing them on fabric. Also, I went to fabric shopping after work. Yes, I worked 2 part-time jobs as a graphic designer and a YouTuber/doll customizer, and I finished my job at 6 p.m. and then as I reached to the fabric stores in the city, some of them were already closing because it was 7 p.m. already. So I have been running from one store to another, searching for this exact shade of pink fabric, and the closest one that I was able to get was this one. So I bought it immediately, and 10 minutes later all the stores were closed. I mean, it indeed sounds dramatic, but if I were to come here tomorrow I would spend 4 hours to commute, so it wasn't really the best option. But anyhow, I began tracing all the pattern pieces on this fabric, left some allowance, and then I cut them out and fray checked them. And these are the colorless jacket fabric pieces. Now, because the fabric was way too thin, I added another layer to it. I really wanted to do lining, but since I was going to glue rhinestones over it, it would not be very comfortable, so I just added this as a secondary layer. Now, because I'm a complete over-controlling psycho-perfectionist, I wanted the rhinestones to be placed very precisely and exactly the way you see in the reference photos. I spent enormous amount of time drawing these lines and marking the placement of the rhinestones from the back side of the pattern. And once I was done with this, I used the lamp of my phone and my ruler, placed the pattern piece over it so that I can see the marked dots that I did for the placement of the rhinestones, and I marked them from the front. All this hassle so that the lines that I drew won't be seen from the front pieces. And of course so that the stones will be glued precisely. Then once that process was over, I began gluing the rhinestones. Now I know some of you were very mad at me in the past for using super glue on fabric, so I bought a fabric glue specifically for this, but the fabric glue texture was very jelly-like, so there is no way I will be able to glue rhinestones with it without making a huge mess, so I used super glue again. I mean, compared to the fabric glue, it has a very liquidy texture to it, so it was very ideal, and I just used a pen to add it to the fabric and glue the rhinestones over it. And if you might be wondering, was it stressful? Cause I mean, one wrong move and the super glue could get us somewhere very undesirably and it would essentially ruin everything. And I had to repeat making the same pattern again, but none of that happened actually. Doing this was not stressful at all. I was actually watching practical magic in the background while doing this. It was so soothing and calming. I also forgot to tell you that I used paper glue to attach these two pattern pieces together, cause with regular pins the pieces they always look kind of wobbly. So once I finished attaching the rhinestones on her jacket, I began gluing them on her skirt and crop top. And there isn't much to say here, I mean, it's the same exact process once again. Once I was finally done with the rhinestones, it was time to hem the edges of her jacket, so I took my time to hand stitch them. And in general, I 100% hand stitched this outfit, cause with all the rhinestones I couldn't risk it using a sewing machine, cause the sewing machine handle might have broken the rhinestones. Then as I finished hemming the edges of her jacket, I stitched these pieces together. And then I also stitched the sleeves. And this is how it looked at the end, and it was finally time to stitch the edges and finish up the jacket. But before that, of course, sleeve edges needed to be hemmed as well. In here I finally finished stitching the edges, and if you might be thinking that I'm lying and the edges are Not actually hand stitched, but here is the proof. When you do the back stitch, the opposite side is always different, so that's how you can tell that this was hand stitched, because I believe you can't really do a back stitch with a sewing machine. But anyways, I flipped the jacket right side out and I was actually scared that some of the rainstones might fall off, and none of that happened. Like, not a single rainstone fell off, which reassured that the method of doing this with a super glue is the best one. It's just, you just have to use a thicker fabric for it. So this is how it looked on a doll body, and I was very happy with it. All I needed is to hem the bottom edge of the jacket and call it a day. Then I began stitching her crop top, and once again I stitched the gap so that it will create the shape for the breasts, and then I began hemming the edges. This is how it looked, and I also needed to hem the sleeve edges since it's going to be sleeveless. Then I hemmed the edges of her crop top's back pattern pieces, and I attached those pieces together. I also added 2 pairs of snap closures to it. Then I began sewing the miniskirt. First I stitched the gap that I left for her back. This is how it ended up looking. So these are the skirt pieces. All I needed is to stitch their edges together and add snap closures from the back of it. So I spent my time hand stitching it. And then I hemmed the top edge. And then I hemmed the bottom edge. And I finally stitched the back edge, flipped the right side out, and added the snap closures at the end. Okay, now the most anticipated part of this project that I'm pretty sure some of you have been waiting for. Let's make the heart-shaped bag. So I began by drawing and cutting out the pattern for it, and then I placed it on Worbla and cut it out. Now initially I was planning to make it out of leather, but then I thought the leather on this scale would be way too thick and just overall difficult to work with, and I was also thinking of adding a zipper. And then the only zipper that I had was this red one, and it didn't quite match, so I made the bag not really functioning but as an accessory slash decoration piece. So I made it as a box, but you can't really open it anymore. I mean, why would you even want to do so? You might break something. So basically I cut out its corners, and in order for the lid to sit on the box, I glued the sides of the lid outside of the edge. And for the box I glued the sides inside of the edge, as you can see. So the bag had once again this exact same diamond texture to it, but this time it looked more like one of these cushions or armchairs with like buttons on them that look like the fabric has been sort of stretched on them, so I thought that I would definitely imitate that. So I took 3 layers of cotton and I cut it into heart shaped again. And then I added some paper glue and glued it in place. Then I took some fabric and then I rubbed the lid with it, and then I stretched it very well so that there will be no wrinkles, and I stitched it to hold it in place. To permanently keep it attached to the lid, I stitched it from the side edges. Obviously, stitching over Worbla is not an easy thing to do, so I was using pliers to pull the needle through. Then once I finished stitching, I cut out all the excess fabric. And then I made another pattern to distinguish the placement of the rhinestones and stitches. I also used a pin to do holes where the rhinestones were supposed to be glued so that I can mark it over the lid. So I cut out this pattern, and then I placed it over the lid and added elastic to keep it in place. And then I marked through the holes with a pencil. And this is how it looked. I also decided to mark the stitch lines so that it will be more comfortable for me to stitch straight lines. And then I began the stitching process. This wasn't easy at all because, as I said, stitching through Worbla is very tough. So for almost every stitch, I needed to use pliers to pull the needle through. And in here I tried way too hard to push the needle through, which ended up going inside my finger, and I'm really sorry if some of you have very weak nerves. I mean, I'm sort of sadistic, so I don't really feel triggered when I see stuff like this. I mean, I grew up in a small farm, and when I was a kid I saw like hundreds of pigs walking with their heads chopped off, so I guess that's why I'm so desensitized sometimes. But anyways, this is how it ended up looking. And now I could finally begin attaching the rhinestones. Okay, so once I finished the lid, it was time to do the actual box. So it was basically the same exact process, so I'm not going to repeat telling the steps once again. Then I glued the lid to the box and it was time to decorate it a bit more. And since I made it like a box, I thought that I could add some creative liberties to it. So the first thing I glued is this leather strap. And then underneath the lid edge I glued a rope, and since Margot was wearing pearl earrings I decided to stitch these pearls over that. And again, this wasn't easy at all, and sometimes I would use once again pliers. And I also pricked my finger really badly. But don't worry, I washed my finger and then I sanitized it and then I attached a bandage to it and I continued working. Then once I finished the pearls, I added this silver thread. It sort of reminded those tiaras that Barbie sometimes came with. Yes, I was very on brand. Then at the end I made the handle and attached it to the bag. And the bag was finally done. Let me know what you think about it, cause I clearly lack any kind of enthusiasm to compliment myself. Then it was time to make her hat. I cut out the base from Warbler and once again stretched the fabric over it and repeated the same steps all over again. Now, since the side stitches were visible, I decided to make a strap to cover it with. So I cut it out, stitched it, this time with my sewing machine, and then I passed it through the straw, and then I pushed the edge of the strap inside the straw with a barbecue stick, and it was flipped right side out. Now all I needed is to iron it, and then I cut it according to the hat size, and I stitched its edges together. And I passed that over the sides of the hat. In the end, I made a tiny bow out of that same exact strap and I attached it to her hat. Then I decided to reuse the same exact pattern for her bag and cut it into a circle. Then I placed that on top of her hat and marked the placement of the rhinestones. This is how it looked, and all I needed is to glue the rhinestones and the hat would be finished. And this is how it looked at the end. Then for her shoes I customized these high heels. First I removed the unnecessary parts of it using my X-Acto knife. Then I sanded all the uneven rough cuts, and I also sanded to remove the glossy texture of it, so that the paint will stick to it and won't chip off in the future. And then I painted them using acrylic paint. I painted them in multiple layers while doing MSC coats, so that the paint, as I said, will stick to the surface. Then I also wanted to decorate it with those nail art tiny balls so that they will match with the diamond texture of her outfit. So first I marked the placement and then I began gluing them on. And this is how they looked at the end. So I did the final layer of MSC and coated it with Tamiya glossy varnish. And our live action Barbie Margot Robbie was finally done. Also the important thing, if you would want to buy this doll, she's currently available on eBay for auction. The eBay link is also available under this video description. Thank you so much for watching guys, and thank you a lot for being so patient with me this time around and staying here even when all my content was completely erased. Also shout out to my Patreons for their ongoing support, and if you feel like you would want to support my art on Patreon, the link is under the video description. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and now enjoy the end result pictures, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.